This the people party.
Live from the Blue Note. Live from the Blue Note. Live from the Blue Note. Live from the Blue Note.
Live from the Blue Note. Come on.
Peace and love, party people. I am Talib Kweli. You are now checking out the world's best podcast, The People's Party. I am your host. We are downtown New York City in Greenwich Village in the legendary Blue Note. This is my home. I do have a residency here that we are setting up for, as you see, the instruments and everything. Shout out to the Whiskey Boys. Shout out to my man, Seth Bird, in the house. And I'm shouting Seth out because next week at my residency, I have a lot of luminaries in the house. Michelle Ndegeocello, Bob James, Slick Rick, Rakim, and the almighty DMC from Run DMC. And shout out to my man Voodoo Faye, who has a spot on Myrtle Avenue. It's called The Spot. He makes clothes, he makes art, but he made this fantastic jacket for me. And it's got augmented reality, which is crazy. And speaking of DMC, Seth, I want the people to see, if you could take your phone out and show them, if y'all see the back of this jacket, you see who is that? It's the King DMC, right? Now we got DMC rapping from the back of the jacket. Today's episode is one of my favorite. I already know I'm calling it that I'm ever going to do because this gentleman today is one of my favorite human beings and one of the most influential comedians of a generation. And he's so good at comedy that he has even elevated to the status of one of the greatest journalists of all time. His integrity is unmatched. He is an actor, a director, an author. He carried us through pivotal cultural moments from the difficult aftermath of 9/11 through the Iraq War, through the presidencies of George Bush and Barack Obama. And he did it all with humor. He cut his teeth in the New York City comedy circuit right around the corner from here at the Comedy Cellar. He has shows on TV from Short Attention Span Theater to The Daily Show, and now he is the host and the creator of one of my favorite shows, The Problem. He has appeared in movies such as Big Daddy and Death to Smoochie and Half Baked, classics. And when he gets to do his own thing and do it his way, he writes and produces and directs movies like Rosewater and Irresistible, a 22-time Primetime Emmy winner, 2 Grammy Awards, the Mark Twain Prize for American Humor Award winner. He is a man of the people in the most sincere way, an incredibly successful artist who uses his well-earned celebrity privilege to uplift others. I admire this man tremendously. I feel fortunate to consider him a friend. Ladies and gentlemen, Jon Stewart is in the place to be.
Man.
What up, what up?
Oh my God.
How you feeling?
If I had known that was coming, honestly, I'd have showered.
You look great.
I'd have dressed up.
This is your The Problem outfit.
Yeah, this is the outfit since 9th grade. So that's the privilege of show business, as you know, is we get to just exist as we are.
Especially post-pandemic.
Post-pandemic, that's exactly right.
That's the
I'd
sweet
like to
spot.
say that this was caused by the pandemic, but unfortunately, this is caused by my lack of flavor.
Well, it's good to see you, John.
It's really good to see you, man.
Well, you were the host of The Daily Show.
Yep,
A staff member had a dog named Kweli.
that's right.
That's right. And
Justin had a
shout
dog
out-
named Kweli. The sweetest dog, too. It was a golden retriever.
I don't know how I feel about him.
No, man. A very influential dog. A lot of the dogs now will look back and say, Kweli was the one. He came up with the whole lying under the desk thing, which now dogs, you'll see that everywhere now.
The OG Kweli
The OG
dog.
Kweli.
Now, you and I got to know each other. Well, I've known you for years. We got to know each other sharing time in Yellow Springs.
Yes.
Around Dave Chappelle and crew.
Yes.
During the lockdown, the first lockdown. Before that, Dayton Strong.
Yes.
Dayton Strong.
Yeah.
The benefit.
Some incredible moments.
Yeah, man. Shout out
that
to
we've
Dave
shared
Chappelle.
together. But the one thing I liked about Yellow Springs was, like everything else in the pandemic, so much of the confusion and noise of everything else kind of fell away, and we all had time to really get with each other in that sort of, it was like a quiet space.
Right.
But I'd been so long at that time without, so the talks we had meant a lot to me. They were like nourishment.
Yeah.
You know, because it just was a really isolating time. And so being able to connect over that period was really beneficial.
Until Mo Armour got everybody sick of COVID. It's Mo Armour's fault. But I remember when I saw you, when you got to Yellow Springs, it took you a minute because we had been there. We had been getting tested 2-3 times a day. We'd been partying together. We formed this little bubble, and John came in like this with his mask on. Like, it took you like hours to
Hey,
take
man,
off your mask.
For months.
You were like this.
Because I'd been that guy like for months with the Lysol wipes. Like I'd go to the grocery store and bring like, I'd be with apples, like bleaching them. Like I was just in that mindset of, it was before. And you know, I'm in that age demographic where they'd be like, if you get it, say your goodbyes. 'Cause
Right.
I was saying to them, like I hadn't had a conversation in months where I had to turn my head.
Right.
Like the idea that we were, and these guys, you're doing Midnight Miracle.
Which you've been
Yassine
on
was in
several
Spain.
episodes, by the way,
Yes.
of this podcast. Thank you for that.
No, my pleasure.
Yeah, thank
Yassine
you.
was in Spain, so he's up on the board. Kweli, Dave, Mo is there, and we're all just talking, and my head's moving around, and I felt naked. Like it still felt very vulnerable, and it took me a bit.
Yes. Thank you for doing Half Baked. You're one of my favorite characters out of many. Red Team Goes.
You know,
Classic cinema.
I can't go to a Denny's at 3:00 in the morning without somebody bringing that up.
We used to do that. We used to look at those $20 bills back in the day. That's real.
And there is some shit back there.
There's some
Don't-
shit.
Yeah. If you really, you know, that's right. You fold it up right. It could be. That's right. You get all kinds of things.
Shout out to the legendary City Gardens in Trenton, New Jersey. Now, you were a busboy, and you
Yeah.
named your production company Busboy Productions.
Yeah.
Because of your vast experience.
My vast experience
at
as a
busboying.
producer. Yeah. Well, it was, you know,
Yeah, what did you learn?
well, none of this idea of show business, you know, this was a different era. This was, you know, the 70s and 80s. I did not come from a family rich in theatrical tradition. My mom was a teacher. My dad was a
share that.
scientist. Yeah.
My mom's a teacher as well.
Meaningful
Yeah.
when your mom's a teacher, you know?
Yes.
The idea of possibilities did not really enter into my mindset. I worked there was a dive bar up on Route 1 in Trenton called The Bottom Half. To give you a sense of the flavor of the neighborhood, I got the job there from my classmate that I went to high school with, Vinny Regolia, and his father, Vinny Regolia. This is Iran hostage crisis era. So everybody had on the Ayatollah Assahola shirts. Like this is where I come from. And this place in Trenton called City Gardens, which was a punk club. Rough area down on Calhoun Street, but it had the best shows. You know, Bad Brains was like the house band, you know, Dead Kennedys, Black Flag, like the best punk shows I'd ever seen. So I got a job there bartending. When you're living in that area, like you kind of, your life is, you go to the tavern on Fridays, you go to the tavern earlier because you just got paid, and you just wait. Like you get your beers and you wait till you turn into the 70-year-old guy who's at the other side of the bar. And City Gardens was the first place that I got into that reeked of possibility, that just the creative energy rolling through that place and the violence, but also that feeling of like, you don't have to fucking stay here. You can try something. And that was the impetus to, you know, I never thought like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go into show business.
Right. There's something about the ethos of those punk bands and Jello Biafra and Henry Rollins and all these guys at this time. And the stuff they were writing, Operation Ivy and stuff. And I know
Yeah.
about this stuff because the white kids who I hung out with were listening to this stuff.
Right.
And I heard myself in that stuff, and they heard themselves in hip hop. And it was a good cultural exchange, specifically with the bands that you're talking about.
Hip hop, especially in those early days, and now there was such viscera to it. Like you felt it in your bones, and that's what punk felt like. The drive of it, the inspiration of it, all those things. And it felt very DIY. Like it didn't feel like you had to be a Juilliard kid. It felt like you just had to be somebody who felt something.
Right.
And hip hop felt like that too. Like you're a kid that feels something, express yourself.
Right.
And that's what the punk movement was. And I knew I didn't have that talent, but I felt something.
Hip hop, it was fuck the police, and punk rock, it was Nazi punks, fuck off.
Yeah, or fuck your parents.
Yeah, or fuck
it
your
was,
parents, right.
It was more like, it was white kids.
Right.
Fuck your parents.
Right.
Fuck the system.
Angst.
Fuck the school.
Right.
Yeah.
We're right around the corner from Comedy Cellar.
Yeah.
It's very very important place in New York City comedy and the comedy world. You were the last performer at the Comedy Center every night for a while, right?
Yeah, it was. So I was working at, I don't even know if the restaurant's still there, and maybe you guys saw it down on McDougal Street, Panchitos.
Panchito, the Mexican spot.
Little Mexican spot. So that's where I was busboy.
I actually know about the spot. I wasn't profiling the spot because it was called Panchito.
Yeah, it was, you know, what was passing for Mexican food in New York City in 1985 and 1986.
Right. Like in
Quesadillas.
Brooklyn, we had Chi-Chi's.
Yeah, similar, same shit. So I was working down there, and the Comedy Cellar was half a block up. And I knew from just being around the scene a little bit that, like, that was the spot. All the guys that I respected, all the guys that I wanted to watch would roll through there. But it wasn't like it was today. It started at 9 and rolled till the last person left. It wasn't like now you go in there, it's 3 shows a night, they're packed, they're rolling it in, and it's a factory.
Yeah, it's like a tourist
That's right.
destination.
So I started working there, and I wasn't good enough to do weekends because that's where, you know, they pay the comics. But during the week, I was good enough for a plate of hummus. That's how you judge your career. Like,
Plate of hummus.
I was good enough. Mamoons, there you go. Mamoons, and that
All right.
was, so Mamoons is the falafel place next door. It's this little hole in the wall that's probably still there today.
They're still there. Started in
best-
Connecticut.
What?
There's too much.
It's a franchise?
It's a franchise, 2 of them.
Brothers.
We grew up as kids in Greenwich Village. We ate a lot of Mamoons because it was vegan and we was health conscious. It was
Right.
like $1.25 for the falafels,
And it was open, was the key.
24/7.
No, man, that was my go-to. So I'd work for my plate of food, and then on the way home, I'd get my Mamoons, and that was breakfast the next day. And then I would go to work at the restaurant, and that was my lunch. Like, because, you know, when you're struggling, because it, you know, even though the city back in the 80s was like, it was rough, it still cost money to live here.
That's right.
And so wherever you could cut that corner,
What you did, right?
you stretch it. But it was, I mean, that was the time of my life. I mean, it was,
Yeah.
I can remember walking home at 4 o'clock in the morning from a good night of getting 15 minutes on stage in front of the wait staff and some drunk Norwegian sailors at, you know, 3 in the morning at the Comedy Cellar, and just thinking I was the luckiest motherfucker to walk the earth. Like, it was
Word up.
just, it was the best.
Shout out to the Cellar. Now you have gone on from doing that to when you finally got to the Daily Show. There was something special going on. It's like you had this magic touch. It's like everybody who came through that after you got on it, Sam B, John Oliver, Stephen Colbert, Trevor
Yeah.
Noah, became really, really trusted sources of news. What do you think that was? And is that always a good thing?
Yeah, no, I don't. I mean, authority hopefully is always earned. So whatever somebody gets in terms of trust, but as we see now in the landscape, trust is a fungible commodity. You know, it means something in different communities than it means to others. Like when people say they don't trust the media, it's sort of a meaningless phrase, because if you watch Fox, you don't trust CNN. But if you watch CNN, you don't trust Newsmax. And if
Right.
you watch Newsmax, you don't trust OAN. You know, it's fiefdoms. You know, it's feudalism. And in some ways that competition has been healthy, and in other ways it's been devastating.
Right.
But the one thing I will say about the people that rolled through there is what they had was talent and integrity.
Integrity.
And those two things together can be a powerful cocktail to whoever becomes their audience. What I mean by that is when you see a lot of the media, it's a cynical pursuit. And I don't think anybody in that building, contrary to what the reputation of comedy might be, was cynical. It was idealistic. No one was saying things solely for the click or to make the money or to flatter a particular ideological mindset. And it was exciting. It was collaborative. What I love about what we do is the collaboration. It's you can't, that moment of inspiration, that moment of creation, that moment of collaboration, it's a drug. And you chase the dragon
Right.
to get to that moment. My favorite parts of the show were never the show. My favorite parts of the show were 10 o'clock in the morning in a room with a bunch of fucking idiots coming up with something and laughing and and feeling that surge of adrenaline that you feel in creation, like I know you feel when you collaborate, with all your different partners.
That's exactly right, which is why my engineer is not even financially responsible for me to have him here. But he's here. He's around somewhere. And I need him here just in case we need to collaborate. But you brought that energy, and I want to talk about the problem later, but I just wanted to note, because of what you just said, that is obviously, from what you're saying, the reason why you've included that. You show that that's a big part of the problem, is showing the collaboration.
Yeah.
And showing how do we get there. So, I appreciate
Getting
that.
there is everything, man. And it's always been, I've always felt that way in a creative pursuit, that having a clarity of vision, having a clarity of intention is really important. But having a flexibility of process is more important. And the process dictates the product.
Yeah.
Always.
I was in South Africa recently. I've been there a bunch of times. Every time I go to South Africa, if I'm in Johannesburg, I go to Soweto every time. And anyone who has not been to Soweto and not gone to see the landmarks and the history and the things that went down there, I encourage you. It's a very important trip. But Trevor Noah's from there. His grandmother's still there. And so his story is so, so inspirational.
Yeah.
I mean, Born a Crime, I know that's the title of his book, but I mean, that's just such a ill way to be born.
Right.
And he's so amazing. And I think people realize that now, but I remember when The Daily Show when you were about to leave, Trevor Noah had done some stuff with The Daily Show, but it was a surprise.
I've been chasing that cat for years.
Okay, that's what it was. I wanted to find out, how did you choose Trevor Noah to?
I just saw a clip of him, man. The process at the show was always, one of the reasons why I left was I could no longer figure out how to aerate the soil. Like so much of that show was about the evolution of it and all the different ways you could think of to try and make it a little bit better than the day before or take it to a higher ground. So we were always looking at tapes of talented people that we thought we might be able to put into that kind of alchemy and create something new, bring some oxygen to the place, inspiration. Because whenever you're doing something like our process had to be like very routinized because it's a factory in a lot of ways. How do you bring sunlight into the factory? And one day, we were sitting in a room and people were just popping tapes in, and they pop in a tape of this young comic. He's up on stage, and the bit he did was so thoughtful and nuanced and clear. I mean, the charisma, like the dimples and shit, that you see, that you can check out even on VHS. Like that's not hard.
Right.
You don't need 4K. But the mindset, 30 seconds into it, I go, that dude could do my job.
Wow.
You just see it. I said, can we call him and ask him, is he around? They would want to come in. And I didn't know anything about him. So we called up and I thought, I'm Jon Stewart. I'm a fucking call.
Right.
I'm gonna drop a call into this young man living in South Africa, and it's gonna blow his fucking mind. I called him and he was like, I've got a tour and I'm doing Dubai. And I was just like, wait, I'm sorry? And then I checked into it and I was like, oh, this guy is a monster on the road. Right. And he's got a huge flourishing career and he's doing and he's a star.
Star internationally.
International star. And it's that United States solipsistic, ethnocentric, all in the head like, but I'm the United States.
Right.
I'm offering you a position on the basic of cables. And Trevor's like, motherfucker, like I could buy your show.
Right.
He went off and he was doing his thing and I always said to him, just whenever you're in town, just come by. Come by and hang out. And he came by and he hung out one day and we talked a bit and we came up with a little bit for him to do on the show and he did it. He did a few other things and I think he was looking to kind of settle in for a little bit. And at that time I knew I was leaving and I knew he was someone that I thought could have a real potential to not do the same thing I did because what's the point of that?
It's a different show.
But to take the foundation of it and create something special beyond it. And that's what he did.
I love what Trevor Noah has done. I love his run. I'm excited to see where he's going to go next.
Yeah.
I saw you show love to Leslie and the people, some of the other hosts.
She's so good.
The most hosted show on network is what they're calling it now?
It's the most hosted show there is. Yeah. You know what Leslie showed me, though?
What?
And it's something that after doing it for so long was something you forget so easily, and that is the importance of joy.
Joy.
she just brought so much joy
Yeah,
to the table.
she did.
And that, it's such a because sometimes we squeeze that shit so hard.
Yeah.
And that you take all the joy out of it and you lose that sense of mischief. And I just loved how she brought that in.
I want to thank you for somehow finding the joy to do it for what, 20 years? How long did you do it for?
17 years.
17 years.
17 years.
On The Daily Show.
Yeah,
Where's
that's
Vaughn?
yeah. I can remember during the run of George Bush. Like I remember looking in the mirror one day and going like, "Look at what the fuck happened to me." And then I remember looking at him and go like, "And this motherfucker's just getting younger, and he's the president." So that's when I was thinking, the presidency should always age the president, not the people. But
Word.
that, and unfortunately, it hasn't worked out that way.
Well, one of the most pivotal, important moments on The Daily Show, and for me, and for a lot of people, I'm sure, is the first show back after 9/11. You said something that resonated. One of your first memories is Dr. King being murdered, and you were 5 years old.
Yeah.
And you talked about the first responders being sort of the tangible, even if for a temporary moment, version of what Dr. King's dream was supposed to be about.
Right.
We didn't judge people by their skin, by their religion, where they're from, their creed, whatever. If you showed up in that moment, you were judged by your actions.
Right.
And you were moved to tears when you spoke on this.
Right.
In 2004, I performed, thanks to my partner Donna, I performed at a benefit thrown by John Field, the Feel Good Foundation.
Oh, okay.
And so we have a connect there.
Yeah, yeah. He's a beast.
He's a beast for 9/11 first responders.
Yeah,
and, yeah. In 2019, you had a speech that went viral that some people like to credit or think helped with the passing of the Victims Compensation Fund reauthorization. This is activism.
Right.
Did you have an activist background before you started doing this type of stuff?
No. And look, it's some of it is learning. Some of it is awakening. Some of it is trying to deal with your own blind spots. Like, I'm a comic. Comics are detached. We stand in the back and we don't participate.
You said we're in the back of the class throwing spitballs.
Yeah, man.
Which is an apt metaphor.
You don't participate because participating is...
Seth MacFarlane said, "I'm not the hero. I'm the guy in the crowd making fun of the hero's shirt."
Done.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And he did that, and he said that as a talking dog.
Yes.
That's the part that is the best part of it.
Right.
But yeah, that's exactly right. And it sometimes takes humbling to understand, because it's also, I don't like performative activism.
That's right.
I've never been a fan of the activism that draws attention but without regard for outcome, that and can be antithetical to the aims of what you're trying to do. But I've been judgmental. The show has always been my contribution, right? So when we first were trying to get it passed in 2010, we did episodes on it. Shame, the idea would be, if my contribution would be to provide some minor air cover for those in the trenches who are actually fighting. But after that, I got involved with John and started to meet these guys and go down to Washington, because they had to renew it in 5 years. And these guys that were sick and dying had to go down to Washington. And I became more familiar with the path that they had to walk on to provide for those that were too sick to walk on it or couldn't go down there. And I saw the grind, like the grind that we appreciate for our art. You know rappers and MCs that have done the grind. And you respect them. You respect the calluses. You respect the grind. I respect the grind for comics.
Right.
I understand when someone's put in the work.
Right.
Seeing them put in the work changed my perspective on what activism was.
Right.
And so I tried to apply myself to that aspect of it as well, to not just be air support, but hopefully be a part in strategic planning, to create the movements that can maybe get momentum into these things.
Yeah, you didn't stop there. What you spoke about just now, I think about when you used to be like, shame works.
But you know what? And the more you learn about shame, the more you learn that it has to be sustained shame.
Right.
Shame that they don't believe they can dodge, because these guys, man, it's fucking dodgeball. And they know that if your arm gets tired, They're done, and they will wait you out. So what I tried to do in our strategies was close every window and door, because they'll find the crack. They'll find where the draft is, and they'll find their way out.
That's your journalistic style as well, your interview style.
You try to. You try to close off avenues of escape and obfuscation. And if you can do that, now they got to deal with you.
Integrity. Yeah.
And hopefully that they don't, then they know they can't escape without dealing with the problem.
You did this again in 2022, just recently, the PACT Act. You have these veterans, you spoke about this on your show, they're exposed to these toxins. And this act was passed recently, right?
So that's another one that's been going on. But again, that's about the culture that this country uses its veterans for. We, the rallying cry was, we always have money for war, but never for the veteran. And
the rhetoric versus the reality, as you like to say.
No question.
Yeah.
And the misunderstanding that the value is in the people, not in the plane. And that's been lost on Capitol Hill. They kind of don't give a fuck.
That story was crazy. I'm looking at, I wrote some of this stuff down, like the burn pits in Iraq were given cancer to soldiers. The VA was denying 70% of the claims.
That's right.
Death by toxic exposure, far exceeding death by bombs and bullets.
No question.
A soldier
Same, by the way, with the 9/11 first responders.
Right.
There's more people that have died, and also the local population. I mean, not just first responders. It's students. It's teachers. It's everybody that lived down there. The death toll post 9/11 is much higher than the death toll on 9/11.
Yeah, it's crazy. I learned so much from your show. I learned about recycling from your show and how it's not helpful
It's
in
bullshit.
many ways. It's bullshit.
Here's how you know it's bullshit.
It sounds like a conspiracy theory on YouTube, but it was on the problem with Jon Stewart, which I took way more seriously.
You know recycling is bullshit when the bins for recycling are plastic. That's how you know.
That's how you know.
Yeah.
Noise is the enemy, clarity is the goal.
Yeah.
You said that.
Always.
This is the statement for the problem. You also described the problem. I'm going to sell it better for you because
Please.
you said it. You said it's the Daily Show, but less entertaining. Right?
Yes, that's right.
I'm going to say for me, it's highly entertaining.
Well, okay,
it's just for people. You have to care a little bit, I think. I watched the Daily Show over and over again. The Daily Show was my go-to on the road. I would download. I traveled all the time, download episodes, so I always have them on my computer. I watched almost every episode of you and the Daily Show. But if you got, I would watch for the opening monologue and then the little skits and the bits and everything.
That's how we made our bones.
Right. And then if you got to a guest that I didn't care about, I tune out.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what it is with this show, is like you're taking more time with the guests that people may not care about.
That's right.
And you're spending more doing deeper dives.
And investing, I think, in trying to tell a story.
Yeah.
The Daily Show really was, it's a reactive medium, and you make your bones on being there. I mean, the truth is, it's just that it's like anything else. Like, why'd you watch a Daily Show? It was home.
It was
like,
on daily.
It was on.
It was
like
the Daily Show.
Yeah, it was on every day, and I was home, and I didn't have anything else to do. This is a little different in that you're trying to tell a story about something, about the systems. It's I liken it to like the Daily Show. I was a weatherman, and maybe this show we're talking more about the climate. We're talking more about the systems.
See, but John, you got to know the difference between weather and climate to even get what you're saying, and that's why this audience for this show is a little different.
Yeah, and also the audience is different solely on the fact that I'm 60 years old.
Right.
Like I'm 60 years old. Like communicating to an audience like we communicated to the Daily Show won't necessarily be the same. I'm not fluent.
It's like Chris Rock said, you're not too old, you're just too old to be in the club.
No question. and that realization is another, life is about humility. Because it's constantly kicking your ass in unintended and surprising ways. And you have to be open to that. And you have to, Dave says something that I think is such an important point in all this too. And he always says, he goes, you have to forgive yourself.
Yeah.
And it's a very hard thing to do. It's hard.
Yeah.
Because it's hard when you get to my age and people tell you, the positive things you've done or whatever that is, to accept it with grace, but to also not manufacture invincibility around that or ego around that, because you know, the bus will hit you tomorrow, man.
That's right.
And
That's right.
and you're always trying to figure out how to humble yourself on your own
Right.
failings.
Well, I think you have to. Like, one of the things that I struggle with is I've always been looked at as this positive, conscious artist. And people go to me as a truth teller and stuff like that. And this is like a narrative that's formed around my art.
Right.
Regardless of how I might live in my private life. this is what's revolved around my art, right? And what happens is that I think people hold me to this high moral standard that I don't necessarily hold myself to sometimes.
Right.
And it just becomes a little tricky to navigate that, I think.
But isn't that just grace? Because it's grace that comes, you know, then it has to come through in your work as well. What I try and separate out is malevolence and incompetence. How much of and ignorance.
Yeah.
What's malevolence and what's ignorance? Ignorance is an epidemic, but it is a highly curable condition. Malevolence runs the world. It's a much narrower slice of people, but they don't sleep. And so that's the battle. How do you engage with ignorance as a force then to muster against malevolence?
See, he's dropping jewels right there. That's 5% knowledge right there. He's like, see, the 10%, you know, they know what's up to 85%. They the poison animal
And also,
eaters.
we do run the banks. Okay, go ahead.
We're gonna get to you running the banks in a second. But before we get to that, because of what you just said, the malevolence and versus the ignorance, there's several examples of you doing that in popular media. Your famous takedown of Tucker Carlson, in which you were self-deprecating. You were like, "Look, I come on after puppets, you know," but you were in his face and confronting some of the ignorance and some of the evil. This has happened with Bill O'Reilly. On your new show, you call the CEO of Shell evil to his face. You say to this man, he says, "I expected you to have a black mustache to twirl. You're the villain of this story." It's the first thing you say to the CEO of Shell. You on the Midnight Miracle, which is also on Luminary, you tell a story of meeting Roger Ailes.
Yeah.
And Dave Chappelle described it as the Luke Skywalker, Darth Vader saber fight.
Yeah.
But in that story, you go on to say, you wonder if you helped add to the noise more than you helped the country progress in the years that you were on The Daily Show.
Sure.
Do you still feel that way?
Sure. History, whether it remembers me or not, isn't the issue. The issue is, in the time that you were here, did you clear the room of smoke or did you add smoke? And there are times where I don't know. I know what the intention was. And I'd like to think that the balance scales, but you know, there are moments where not the case. And
the country has more right. Fox News is more powerful.
No question. But I never thought, you know, listen, the consequence of that in terms of the larger polarization, I don't really look at. I mean it more in terms of were the arguments sound? Were we right? Was what we were trying to put forth to the good of those that needed the most,
right,
and to the detriment of those who were preventing them from getting it. And that's all that, you know, that's the balance sheet, and you take note of it every day. But to the larger global scale of polarization, like, you know, I'm a drop of water in the ocean. Like, that's just, those tides run on the lunar calendar, not on man's time. So
makes sense.
I don't think of it in that way, but I do think of it in terms of on those individual moments, and did we execute those moments to the highest level of our abilities? But yeah, you know, listen, nobody wants to look back on their career and be like, "Damn, I fucked this world royally." But to your point though about like a guy like Tucker Carlson, like, that's cynical. What he does is cynical,
right?
And he hides the true motivation for it. And that's what I mean by the difference between well-intentioned, honest brokering and cynical manipulation.
Yeah, I definitely put him on the evil side. I wasn't going to speak for you, but
no.
For me, I put him in the.
No question.
I feel like he knows exactly what he's doing and saying.
No question.
I don't feel like he's ignorant about his messaging and his coding.
No. It's all purposeful,
Yeah.
and it's marshaling Very, very malevolent forces.
Yes.
No question.
Now I want to shout out Derek Hamilton. who
Derek Hamilton.
Had on your show. He's a great guy that
So
not enough
smart.
people know about him.
Oh, he's so smart.
He's a pro-black, anti-racist economist.
Yes.
Very smart, into social justice, but knows his shit when it comes to the numbers. Pro-reparations guy.
Right.
So if we're going to make an argument for reparations, he's the guy to make the argument.
Yes.
LeVar Burton is a constant guest on the show.
Yes.
With his book, It All Started with Slave
Yes.
Labor.
It all
Because
started with slave labor.
Everything starts with slave labor.
That's right.
It's the joke. You speak about reparations on your show. Thank you for doing that. You have a whole reparations episode. You discuss how racism is a spectrum that ends at racism on both sides.
That's right.
Toni Morrison had a viral moment years back.
Right.
And she's talking about in the discussions of racism, how we solve it. Please take me out of it. This is the oppressor problem. It's white people problem. It's a white people problem
Right.
to solve. And you took that to heart. And I've never seen anybody do this, but you had an all-white panel addressing racism, which I think if you haven't studied critical race theory or know about Toni Morrison or know why you did that, it might be shocking to some people.
It was.
Some people might have been upset.
That is correct.
Okay. I didn't even know that part, but I would just assume so, just from the optics.
It was maybe the most controversial that we've done, and the most, I think, misunderstood. And I think it's always misunderstood when you go at something that you believe is systemic, because people take it as a personal attack on their morality. And the minute that they feel attacked on a moral level at their very soul, where they believe in their hearts they are not racist, that's when defensiveness and hostility are at their peak.
Yeah.
And I don't know how to decouple the act of living in something that was the creation of a flawed, malevolent system. We all participate, right? All of us.
All of us.
And that's what I mean by the grace of it. I live in, Manhattan. These buildings got here through bloodshed and through coercion.
Around here, built on the burial grounds of
On the
Africans.
burial grounds of Africans and more than likely hippies from the 1960s.
Right. No, that's actually true. Greenwich Village the history of this place is actually a pauper's grave.
Oh, really?
From the
Okay.
1800s, they built this neighborhood on the graves of just a bunch of poor people, mass graves.
Now that's the second part of it. We have always in this country criminalized struggle. I mean, to the literal end of, there were prisons known as debtors' prisons. If you couldn't pay your bills, that was a legal offense to the system.
Right.
You cannot pay your bills, so I'm afraid we're going to have to keep you in a cage.
Right.
And the whole point of what I was trying to impart was, when something has been built that way, it's not enough to just say we will stop building more of it. But if the effort isn't made to dismantle those things, then they remain not as inert, abandoned structures, but as structures that still they have an effect to this day. And it's not meant as an attack on those who live in them now. We all do. We all participate in exploitative systems. I'm woke. My fucking phone is not.
That's right.
But I use it because it has birds that are angry on it, and I love them.
Right.
But do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, it's not so. That's what I meant
That's
by
exactly
the humility of, like, I know what I am. I try and live to the good unless the inconvenience of it is too great.
And that's what Andrew Sullivan couldn't wrap his head around.
Couldn't.
Now, when I'm a little bit familiar with Andrew Sullivan
Sure.
over the years. I'm not gonna lie, John. When I saw you announced the first guest, I was like, "Oh, okay."
Yeah.
And the second guest, and I said, "Andrew Sullivan?
Yeah.
What, pray tell, could Andrew Sullivan have to offer to this conversation?" And I'm like,
Turned out very little.
very little. But what's funny is that I haven't heard Andrew Sullivan talk in years.
Yeah.
And here you are at a panel with all these white people, and we're all having a discussion. I'm like, maybe Andrew Sullivan has turned a new leaf. Maybe he's going to say something, and he did not disappoint. Good on you for calling him a liar. He contradicted himself the whole time. Everyone's talking. He was just sitting there on Zoom like this,
Right.
shaking his head the whole time. He was literally and quite literally trying to colonize that conversation. That's what he was doing. He was really on some I'm white and I say so, and he didn't understand. He didn't understand at all. He was very defensive. When he got to, this was a trigger for me, because you kept doing what I said you do before, closing the doors and the windows. You weren't letting him out. You were being respectful, but you weren't letting him get away with saying some of that bullshit he was saying. But when he got to this anti-white extremism, that to me that's the part where I got upset. Before I was just like, ooh.
Right.
I got upset when he said anti-white, because I don't think Andrew Sullivan knows this. I'd like to think that he's has good intentions.
Right.
But I don't think that he knows that when he says that, he's doing Nazi rhetoric.
I would agree with you. I don't think no. Here's what I think is, again, the problem. And this is throughout many of these fault lines in the society. And it's the all lives matter argument, right? So what he's saying is, how could there be systemic racism if white people fought in the Civil War? Not all white people are racist. And that's fine to say. And if they want to say, like, but my answer to that is always, well, how many white people are racist? And the answer is always enough. Enough to put Jim Crow laws into place. Enough to allow slavery in a country with a constitution where all men are created equal. How many? Enough. Are there some fighting against? Of course. But how many are? Enough.
Systems.
And the fight is to make sure that there's not enough to impact and impart the systems that oppress people. And I don't understand. I think the problem for me is I don't understand the defensiveness around it, because just accepting things as they were is the most basic building block of a diagnosis, and which is the most basic building block of any treatment. So the question is, and what I think I always come to is, the reason why this conversation is so difficult is life is hard. And nobody whose life is hard wants to be told that their life is actually easier. And so you get into this one-upmanship of whose life is harder.
The oppression Olympics.
The oppression Olympics. But at the core of it is a simple truth.
Yeah.
And that is, I feel like people that aren't me are going to get the resources that should be going to people who are me.
Yes.
It's resource guarding.
Yes. It's that equality is not a pie. You're going to still get your slice.
Well, I think the argument has to be that investing in tearing down these systems makes the pie bigger.
Yes.
This isn't entitlement. This isn't a penalty. This is investing in something which has corroded and weakened our country. If you can strengthen an area of our country that is a fault line, if you can refurbish that, if you can strengthen it, you strengthen all of us. In any of this, I don't understand why it's not considered investment in human capital.
A rising tide lifts all boats.
The enemy of any healthy country is entrenched poverty.
And how you treat your poor people.
And how you treat your poor people.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, recently, I watched you power through an Ohio audience with Dave. And speaking of Andrew Sullivan, I feel like Andrew Sullivan is the type of gay white guy that Dave Chappelle's talking about in his comedy. As he's talking about Andrew Sullivan. But, you know, John is a legend. He's an icon, and we're performing at, it's like Thanksgiving, maybe?
New Year's.
It was New Year's.
New Year's.
It's all a blur, although
It's
I
a
don't
blur.
celebrate holidays.
Yeah, it was New Year's.
But it was like a football game going on.
Yeah.
And
oh yeah, the national championship football game is going on while the concert is going on in Columbus.
Right.
Yeah.
And you're doing a set about how blacks and Jews need to come together and get whitey in Ohio. And some people in the audience didn't know how to feel about this. And you said, oh, y'all are whitey.
Yeah, you know, it doesn't always go great.
Sounds like a wonderful way to bring it.
No, but it was.
Talk about it.
And it's
Old Lang
funny.
Syne, baby.
It's funny because I shout out to Radio Raheem because I'm staying there with Radio Raheem.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh my God, this is not going well. I was like, this is amazing. This is amazing. Look at what he's doing. This is comedic gold. Like, because the more that the more uncomfortable they got, the more Jew jokes you did. You did jokes about Hanukkah.
Yeah,
you did like
man.
a whole set on Hanukkah. It was crazy. You did an episode about globalization on
Yeah.
your show. And you also talk about how certain terms that are associated with economics, socialism, globalism, are used as code words for Jewish people. And those things have there's been an uptick in that. There's an uptick in anti-Semitism.
Sure.
People using these terms more, trying to
Well,
demonize.
whenever there are stressors in the world that seem to be coming to a head, there's an uptick in all isms.
Yeah,
Anti-Semitism, racism,
Absolutely.
anti-gay rhetoric. Like, it's a way for people to blow off steam against those that are least equipped to do anything.
What was interesting to me, though, is that your episode on globalization made me think about the fact that I think people conflate globalism and globalization.
Yes, that's
And
true.
I think you did a good episode on that because globalism is an ancient concept.
Yes.
You know, like it's the rising tide lifts all boats. We're all going to do business together. It's going to be good for everybody.
Right.
But people are like, oh, no, that's the Jews immediately when they hear that.
Yeah. They're running it. Or what I liken it to is, so what ran the world when the world started to develop was colonialism. It was a way of, the world has generally run on the extraction of necessary materials from people at an unfair price. It all started with slave labor.
Yeah.
But the whole point of colonial powers was not, I will bring you Christianity and civilization. It was, is that cinnamon?
Right.
Is that saffron? I could use that in my paella.
Right.
And they go and they extract it, and for the price of their army. It will keep our army. And by the way, the same tactics go on. If you look at our war in Afghanistan, there was a fighting season. And the fighting season was when the Afghans would harvest their opium. And then they would sell their opium through this network called the Haqqani Network into Pakistan, and they would get their weapons, and then they'd be ready to fight. Like, natural resources have always powered empires and wars and all sorts of things.
Yeah.
Globalization, to some extent, is the neutered form of that colonialism.
Right.
It's still, look what China's role is in Africa right now. It's not strictly, it's not in the way that you think of Chinese warships come and they take and they utilize slave labor. They come in and they go, we'll build you a road, but we sure do want all that cobalt for nothing. And then they build them a shitty road and they get all the cobalt and they
Right.
fucking get out of there.
Right.
The pursuit of supply lines is globalization.
Yeah.
And it's not how we all learned it in school.
Right.
The triangle trade and
Right.
all those types of things.
Right.
But it's the same principle. Where can I get my shit the cheapest?
That's exactly right. Now, speaking of colonialism, I like that segue. I'm segue king. Segue God right over here. I appreciate you as an artist and as a humanitarian, as a human being, because I imagine it can be difficult because you are someone who is righteously speaks out against the disgusting, violent, terrible anti-Semitism that comes from all facets of our society.
Sure.
But you also are humanitarian enough to speak on behalf of Palestinians who are being being treated like second-class citizens. And do you get any pushback as a Jewish person because of this?
No, everybody's cool with it. Everybody's cool with it till they find your email address.
Right. Right.
Of course. You know, again, it's, and there are a lot of reasons for that, but one of them is that as a Jewish person, you are saddled with the idea that you are not a citizen of America or a citizen of the world. You are a citizen of Israel. And you must back their actions or the actions of, and one has nothing to do with the other, and one has nothing to do with being Jewish or not being Jewish or whatever it is that people choose on their religion or on their history or on their background. It has to do with in the way that I view governments that don't act on behalf of or that, you know, what has happened in that part of the world is tragic, And unfortunately, I think the biggest problem is it's to nobody's benefit but the Palestinian people that it get resolved.
Right.
It's not to the benefit of the Israeli government. They use the Palestinian issue as a cudgel. And they continue to build settlements and whatever it is they want to do. And no one's suggesting that like terror attacks are okay and that's a good thing. But if you're held to that standard that you don't get your state until nobody tries to kill anybody else, well, then you're never going to get your state. It's not to the benefit of the other Arab leaders in the region because their people can be mistreated in the same way by their autocracies. So why do they want to fix the Palestinian situation when they can use Israel as an easy code to get their people in line? Don't look at us, look at Israel.
Right.
We're fucking with you. Look how they fuck with the Palestinians. It's not to the United States' benefit because we have an ally in the region that's a lot more complicated for us than in other ways because they rely on our military aid and all kinds of other things.
Yes, indeed.
So if it's not in anybody's interests in the powers of status quo, what chance do they have?
It's a very efficient way of looking at it. That's exactly what it is.
But what chance?
Yeah.
And it's not really to Hamas's benefit and it's not to Fatah's benefit because then they lose their grip on power. So the only people who always lose are the day in, day out Palestinian people.
Yeah.
Because it's to no one's benefit to help them but them.
Yes, indeed.
And so not recognizing that is to be blind to any dynamic. But that doesn't negate how I feel about anti-Semitism.
Of course.
And anti-Semitism is not the same as Zionism.
That's right.
It's not the same as any of it. But boy, don't have that conversation with people.
I appreciate the way you're
that's-
able to have the conversation.
Dude.
A lot of people are not able to do it. I mean, I had a situation where I'm not even like the BDS dude, but I've done benefits for BDS and I've said Free Palestine on records because it seemed like the right thing to do. I align myself with causes that make sense to me. And I had a series of venues in Germany, of all places, cancel my shows because there was a law passed, I think around 2019, that if you support BDS, you're supporting hate speech. And so it's interesting because these Nazis online, a bunch of Nazis online started an online campaign to be like, this guy supports BDS. So one by one, all those venues.
Right,
I heard
right.
you say on Colbert, talking about Kanye and Kyrie, how you get called anti-Semitic for this. And so I related to that because I'm like, hey, what did I do? I get called it sometimes as well.
Well, generally they'll go self-hating Jew.
Self-hating Jew, yeah.
They don't, and you'll get anti-Semitic sometimes, but mostly you get self-hating Jew.
What I get is, well, you're the original Jew.
Yes. I've read that book too.
Now, your film Rosewater is, beyond it being an important story that needed to be told, and thank you for making it.
Yeah.
As a director, it's a beautiful film.
Oh, thank you.
It looks and feels amazing.
Gentleman by the name of Bobby Bukowski, who was the DP on it. Wildly necessary because he had the unenviable task of translating TV brain into film look.
Yeah.
So I could, and he was a wonderful collaborator, and that's what I also love about movies is the collaboration. But he was a wonderful collaborator in being able to translate intention into feel, into vision, and did an amazing job of that.
Yeah, and Irresistible is really, really, really good. The ensemble cast, you had Steve Carell, of course, it's amazing.
We had probably the most fun I think I've ever had doing something.
That
doing
looked
it.
fun.
It
Rose Byrne, is that how I say her name?
Rose Byrne, yeah.
Rose Byrne is maybe the most underrated actor.
Oh, she's
in a long. Everything she's in, she's popping off of that screen.
Yeah. And all nice people, For both of those shoots, I was very fortunate to have people who came into it with the right, I make movies for not a lot of money. They're not big studio pictures. And, for instance, the conditions on Rosewater, we shot it in Jordan.
Right.
In the middle of summer during Ramadan.
Yeah.
So the crew, which is Jordanian, basically is not eating or drinking the entire day. And it's 100 degrees and we're in a prison.
Right.
And so for your Hollywood actors, it's a slightly different environment.
Yeah.
But at least I was a first-time director.
Yeah.
So that helped.
Right. What do you get out of making movies that you don't get from the stand-up or the interviews? Because even with like Irresistible ended with an interview. It's like, I feel like he was like, I got to get one in.
I got to get one in. You get consideration. The Daily Show is was on every day, and it was a 17-year project. But it was a 17-year project where every day we made egg salad. And egg salad's really good that day. But 3 days later, you're like, damn, somebody want to throw out the egg salad.
Right. Aging like avocados.
That's right.
as they
Oh,
say.
nice one. But yeah, it's the kind of thing that in film you get to consider, you get to take your time and elevate frames. And not just you, but you get to see how a great art director will elevate it through maybe production design, or a great wardrobe person will elevate it through the way they design the cast wardrobe, or a way that a musical artist will elevate it when it's time to score, or when it's time to add in. Watching people take something that you think is maybe inert and continue to buff and polish it and make it shine is exciting.
Yeah.
Bringing people of expertise in and then allowing them to use that expertise to make what you made better.
It's a beautiful thing.
It's beautiful.
Beautiful thing. Chris Cooper's character in the movie says, if you can't live your principles, I guess they're just hobbies.
Yes.
I feel like that sums up what you're trying to do.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it sums up an aspiration, but also a knowledge that a little more complicated than I try desperately to do that.
Right.
But I also try very hard to remind myself that I don't.
Right.
If that's possible.
Now, you already have all these things that you do that people say John is such a wonderful guy for, but on top of that, you also run a sanctuary for abused animals.
That's my wife.
It started with Bufflehead Farm. Is that still?
That's right, yeah.
Bufflehead Farm?
Yeah. Now it's Hawkeye. We moved it to a slightly larger parcel because apparently pigs tear the shit out of places. So.
Yeah, the conversation that you had, I forgot which show it was, but people started talking about how much they love bacon. It was very
Yes.
hard for you. I could see
Well,
you were like, the bacon has names.
yes. Once you know that, it messes you up.
Yeah.
And listen, man, I don't begrudge anybody their dietary choices or any of those things. I'm just not in a position. Those are very personal things. And for many years, I was more meat than man. But
How long you been a vegan for?
7 years, not vegan,
Oh, not
vegetarian,
vegan.
but
Vegetarian, okay.
7 years, something like that. But before that, I was a corned beefitarian.
Corned beefitarian.
So I only ate corned beef in the shapes of different animals. Different chickens, things, whatever it was. But, it's a different relationship. And so if I can do it, I try very hard to do it. But I also wholly respect other people's choices on smoking, drinking, eating, whatever the fuck you want to do. I'm not in a position to judge.
Well, that sounds like a good time to me. Don't threaten me with a good time. Ladies and gentlemen, Jon Stewart, People's Party.
My man.
Thank you.
A pleasure.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. My pleasure. My pleasure.